All right, what's up, Noah? Thank you for coming on, brother.
Mr. Lucas, thank you for having me.
Dude, I feel like your lifestyle is like so captivating. I don't know. How did you like get into that? Just get right
Well,
into
thank
it.
you. I appreciate it. I got into it because I was never really satisfied with the kind of safety and structure of the traditional lifestyle model of, being from the United States, which is one of the best things that, I'm most grateful for is being an American citizen and growing up in a very nice environment. But I always felt very condensed. I always felt very, I guess, tied down, and I really didn't like that. So I kind of took every opportunity I could to go and travel. I always found that novel experiences were always my favorite experiences. My first summer at summer camp was the best summer ever. My second summer at summer camp was incredibly boring. So, between going and living with the host family in Spain when I was in high school, kind of finagling my way into that, we had an exchange student at my school, and he invited me to come stay with him. And then going to school out in Thailand for a little bit. I just kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do, and I was willing to make the sacrifices needed to make mobility my number one priority in life.
I feel like that makes a lot of sense. And for me, I kind of like, I don't know, I resonate with the fact just like you don't want to be in the same place, like a new environment kind of just switches it up. So that's why I'm here in Costa Rica trying to like follow your vibe. And I commend you for like putting it out there that you did it because like I don't know. Before that, I was just like, dude, I don't know. Like, and then like following you, just going to all these places. So it's like, once you see someone else do it, you're like, hey, like, why can't I do it? Um, do you kind of see it the same way? Was there anyone that you looked up to that was traveling? I know like Tim Ferriss is probably one of those guys, but I don't know anyone else.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss was my biggest influence for sure. And Tim Ferriss was a really interesting one because I, like many people, had a tendency to put my heroes on a pedestal. And we had this idealization, and that's why they say never meet your heroes. But when I was really getting into Tim and the 4-hour work week, that was the first time where I was able to look at someone and say, okay, this guy isn't perfect. I don't want to be 100% like him. I want to be my own person. And everybody has flaws and everybody has unique personalities. But there are aspects about this guy that I absolutely, want to embody entirely. So Tim was the biggest one, but I started doing all this before I had exposure to any of the, like make money online stuff, any of the money Twitter stuff. I was doing this before I got on Twitter. I got on Twitter last April, so I really had to kind of start from scratch and say what would be an ideal lifestyle, an ideal career path, and an ideal skill set that would enable me to have complete autonomy over my time, over my location, over everything. And now with COVID, it's just so much simpler. But back then, when I was 19 and I was in college, I was coming up with a game plan the second I got back from Thailand.
Are you saying you came up with a game plan for how you're gonna like go abroad and just make money online, or just travel in general?
Both, right? How can I work from wherever and how can I do what I want to do, which is just, explore jungles and spend time in very foreign countries. So, the way that I approached that was through tech, because that was still my locus of options in my mind, right? Going to school, it's like you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be in finance. But I was like, tech and the startup world seemed to have the most autonomy. So, working on a startup, starting a team, and then making sure that that team was like purposefully asynchronous, right? Having people all over the globe so time zone wouldn't be an issue to begin with. And then just building an environment that was really strategic and it didn't require you to be online all day. And kind of just working from there, but then realizing that even that had limitations. And that's really when the 4-hour work week came, and that completely changed my perspective and kind of opened my eyes to, you know, a better way of approaching work and subsequently lifestyle.
In general, what are the main things you look to, like as far as lifestyle, that are like, if you had to say like 3 to 5 things that are just like, I need these to like survive and just like feel good, what are they?
Yeah, well, dude, that's what I've been trying to figure out for the last decade and especially for the last 2 years, right? Because there's things that I know that make me feel good and there's things that I know that make me feel bad. And sometimes you forget about that and then you move back to an environment where those shitty things are there and you're like, why do I feel bad? But, the biggest ones for me is I like the ability to kind of do whatever I want tomorrow, right? So the knowing that I could get up and leave tomorrow is a good feeling for me. Some people might be like, no, that's commitment issues or something like that. But it's really just a feeling that I like. It gives me a certain sense of freedom and autonomy. But the ocean is an absolute non-negotiable for me. I just really have a really strong connection to the ocean. I do believe in the aquatic ape theory, and the theory that essentially the reason that humans are the way that they are and that we outperformed all the other primates was because we had an affinity for the ocean. That's why we like crunchy foods, because we love to eat crustaceans. That's why we don't have any body hair and we have this weird poof of body fat on our belly. So I have a special connection to the ocean. I like being able to be in the sticks, in the woods. I don't like being in a city on the beach. I like the fact that I can walk outside of my house and I'm in the jungle, right? And being able to just walk barefoot everywhere. I don't like wearing shirts. I like a culture that enables me to kind of be very free and like wear nothing but my cotton shorts. Those are the primary things. Other than that, having access to local food, that kind of goes hand in hand with this. The one thing that I am now really trying to focus on as well is finding environments that are conducive to my work as well. Inspiring environments. I used to like the real rugged stuff, but I find that the real rugged stuff doesn't really get me in an environment where I want to sit behind my computer. So finding that balance is kind of my goal here now, not going one or the other.
It makes sense. Have you always been the kind of guy that is into health and like into being outside, or was that kind of evolved from your traveling and then realizing, hey, like I'm going in the ocean all the time? Like, or did you always like have the ocean and health in general as like one of your main pillars from like a young age?
So I believe that I always liked nature and I've always been obsessed with animals, but I also grew up in Minnesota. So I realized that I would get very depressed in the winters and I didn't know why. I thought it was just brain chemistry, right? That's what they say. It's always just brain chemistry. But in the summers, I would be literally a different person, right? I was on the lakes all day, so that had a factor there. But I never really pieced two and two together from an aspect of like, oh, it's possible to have this 24/7, right? So that's kind of, one of the reasons I got into health was that I just, was experiencing a lot of seasonal affective depression. I also felt like I didn't have a lot of control over a lot of aspects of my life. I was small as a kid. I like had trouble regulating my emotions, with ADHD. And I just found that the one thing that I had control over were the inputs and outputs with my body, right? So my initial input in health was not healthy. It was like traditional bodybuilding and it was being a meathead, right? Going to the gym at 10 p.m., ripping 300 milligrams of caffeine, destroying my circadian rhythm, eating 24/7, and then compounding that with, being kind of a party animal in college. I always had health as a said priority, but it was really just fitness. And fitness and health are two disparate things, in my opinion. I think I really started getting into health after I got a concussion, a number of concussions in college, and then starting to deal with those post-concussive symptoms senior year. And that's when I kind of started reinventing the wheel and looking at health at a deeper level than just fitness and body composition.
As far as like health and like supplements go, like I know those are like two things that a lot of people put together, but then there's also like the other side of things where people are just like, I don't need any supplements. I can just do straight holistic approach. So how do you view like those two kind of like converging into one life that you live where you do
Yeah,
use supplements, but you do like agree with like the holistic principles?
listen, I love supplements, right? Supplements are a lot of my life, but on average, I say I probably take less. No, I definitely don't do that. But I don't think that supplements are the golden bullet. I do think they're good at treating acute issues, but at the end of the day, I include supplements as the thing to move the needle because all of my other foundations are covered and have been covered for the last, half a decade, right? So, my lifestyle is high tier in terms of health. My toxin reduction and my toxin avoidance is top tier. My nutrition is super dialed and my training is super dialed. So I'm at that point where it's that next level. And to be honest, I kind of look at supplementation and foundational health as two separate things, right? Supplementation is in and of itself a pursuit that I'm going for, right? I think someone saying that supplementation is everything or kind of making that distinction is similar to someone who likes some other nuanced topic about health, like, no, not grounding is not a good example, but I guess for me to say that is I look at supplementation as a secondary factor, and it's just something that I'm really, really interested in. I don't think I'm
Hmm.
interested in it because it's the most important aspect of health. I'm most interested in it because it's the most interesting aspect of health, and I think it's one of the more important things to get right. If you are going to play the supplementation game, you really have to get it right. You have to have this next level of understanding of multiple facets of health, right? Not just biology, but pharmacology, neurology, all of these different things. And it's a very meticulous game. I see a lot of people messing up their health with supplements. So it's a game that I've opted into and I'm willing to play. But, I also want to remind you and everybody listening, like, I'm not a supplement junkie. I kind of am now because I just went 5 months with no supplements whatsoever, right? I was living in a place where I couldn't even get any mail and I just didn't have access to any supplements. So now that I have access to those supplements again, I'm experimenting with them, but I'm doing so from an experimental standpoint, right? I'm not doing so because I think I need it. I'm doing so because I want to see what kind of needles can be pulled because it's a hobby of mine.
At this point in your life, it seems like you've kind of gotten what you would have like dreamed of almost. So how do you like stay motivated? I'm not saying like how do you stay motivated, but like more so like what is like your next thing that you're like, hey, like this is something like I want to do or like accomplish? Because like once you get like the lifestyle down and like you dial in all your like fitness aspects, I guess, which are all like big components for you. Like what is the next thing where you're like, hey, like this is really what I want to do?
That's a really good question. So, I think a lot of this idea of like finding your ideal lifestyle, it's trial and error, right? I like knew that or in my head, my ideal lifestyle was living on the beach, driving a motorcycle, in a foreign country and working 10 hours a week. And I hit that before I even got on Twitter. I started my Twitter while I was doing that. And half of the reason that I started my Twitter is because I got to what I thought my goal was. And I realized that there was another level to it, right? There was another added layer of depth. And for me, I really like the idea of having an impact. I love it. It's the one thing that drives me, it's the one thing that inspires me. I have a really tough time getting externally motivated for anything. To be honest, a lot of the reason that I do what I do, it comes from intrinsic motivation. And, I'm not the type of guy that needs to feel garbage to push myself. I'm not the type of guy that needs like the grind to motivate me. A lot of what I do is just based out of curiosity and enjoyment and having fun. And I try to stay there. So right now, my big goals are to continue doing what I'm doing in terms of just thinking about what makes a good life and what type of advice I can give people that are struggling with the same things that I struggled with. If I can save people time doing that and in the process better understand my approach and my understanding of life in general, I can see myself doing that for the rest of my life. And that's very rare because my typical adherence to anything is usually fickle after 3 months. So I think that's the primary factor. I think secondary factor now is trying to find a way to kind of get back to one of my original, you know, passions, which was brand building. It's always what I've been obsessed with, the idea of bringing something into the light and creating it in this world. And in the world that we live in, one of the best ways to really make major impact and social change is through brands, right? And personal brands as well as product and consumer brands. So I think that's the next step. Obviously with the supplement space, there's a lot of bad players, there's a lot of misinformation, and I think most importantly, there's just a lack of education. So taking a strong education-based approach is something that I really want to do, and I'm working with some really, really great partners that also share that belief with me. And that's really what I before I became super obsessive with health and made it very much a part of my like life and career. I was working with supplement brands for since I started my professional career. So that seems like a great way to make impact.
I just came up with this idea, but I know like obviously like you hate the city and like, but have you ever thought about like, hey, if I went back and just bombarded myself with being in New York City for like 3 weeks, like how off the rails things would go? Or you, I mean, obviously, like you probably wouldn't want to consider like doing that for yourself, but do you ever like think about like how some people might be like in a very similar like position to you as far as like they have the same, I'm not saying like they have the same potential that you have, but like they have a lot of the same qualities you have, but they're just in a different environment that's not allowing them to thrive. So I don't know how you view that as far as like EMFs and cities and just like being confined inside and like how you could potentially make a change for people like that.
Yeah, well, that's why I push a lot of the hunter type stuff, right? That idea that, hey, listen, this environment that we're told is the ideal environment, the New York Cities, the LAs, they're not optimal for everybody. And some people have higher toxin resilience than others. But I find that there's a subsection of people, typically people that align with ADHD prognoses, that do not thrive in those environments. They're highly susceptible to their external environment. They're highly susceptible to anything unnatural. And it's really important for those people to find that ideal environment because they're oftentimes the people that occupy the ends of the bell curve in society. They either become like extraordinary, really successful, live incredible lives, or they're relegated to mediocrity. They have to drug themselves up and really drag their feet just to be normal. So it's one of those things where if those people know that this thing that they're dealing with is not a weakness, it's not a disability, it's a unique neurological type that at one point made them way more effective at survival and probably one of the elite hunter gatherers, they can really take advantage of their potential if they just try to explore a different environment. And when I say environment, I mean a geographical environment, but also, work environment, a lifestyle environment, just changing up the way that they live their life.
I've heard you talk about like food and just being like eating like a diet that's like where you are living, like similar to your environment. So how did you like come across that idea and like I don't know, just a little bit about like that as far as like how you came to approach that.
Yeah, that's funny you bring that up. That's kind of one of those newer layers of the health onion that I'm starting to peel back. And I am the furthest thing from knowledgeable in that space because it's so new to me. But, I started kind of looking at some of Jack Cruz's stuff. I think Jack Cruz has a lot of interesting things to say. I think the way that he says it is very off-putting, and I think he's an unnecessary asshole. So that's really unfortunate because circadian biology is very interesting to me. But Ryan Carter, Live Vitae, a friend of mine, he's really big on that as well, where he only eats things that grow in his geographical region. And I found that interesting because it was so foreign to me. I understood the idea of eating things that your ancestors would, be prone to consuming. But, that's so meddled because your ancestors were also living in the environment that they evolved in over that period of time as their unique digestive capabilities were evolving. So for me, as someone who is relatively mixed, I'm Persian and German, and those are two very different geographical regions. I think trying to find a balance between that and eating things that are local makes so much sense. And let's look at it from the rational standpoint first. Obviously, you want things that are local, right? That means less time in transport. You want to look at the humanitarian aspect, less impact on the environment, but also it just means it's going to be more organic. So for me here, being able to load up my kitchen with fruit that I'm finding on trees, like as I'm walking through the town, banana trees, jackfruit, star fruit, all of these fruit that I didn't even know existed in the northern hemisphere, in the western hemisphere. I can now, just load up in my kitchen. That's huge, and that's self-serving in and of itself because it gives you more of a connection with where you are. But on top of that, the argument for eating geolocationally, I believe, comes down to the water and the light environment in that space. I can't tell you why that has such a significant impact, but that is something I definitely need to dig more into because a lot of very smart people seem to be very adamant about eating within their longitude.
So on the topic of circadian biology, I've kind of like once I realized like my sleep was like such a big factor as far as health and then trying to like optimize that, I kind of like got into like red light at night and just like avoiding blue light. So how do you like think about that as far as like doing that, but then also like maximizing your life to like be happy and like wanting to go out? Because those are like two completely opposite things unless you're able to fit in your lifestyle where other people are doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. So my approach to health is very much an approach of resiliency because I was on the other end where I was just an optimizer. My life was miserable and I didn't look good. My anxiety was through the roof. I found it naturally very feminizing as well, which is interesting. And anytime I go back into optimizer mode, I notice a little bit more feminine energy, which sounds really coy and it sounds very woo woo out there, but there's legitimacy to that. That's why most languages have genders, right? Because things have certain feminine, masculine energies. But when it comes to trying to find a balance between those, typically what I will do is I will cycle everything. I get bored, right? I think a lot of that comes down to the wanderlust gene. It's it's a gene variant on the dopamine D4 receptor. It's R7, so it's like 7 repeats, and it makes you very bored of things. That novelty wears off really quick. So, I'll go out, but when I go out, I know everything I'm doing that is bad for me and of that point.
Hmm.
And as I'm going, I just naturally keep a tally of here's all of the biological stressors that I'm facing. How can I make sure to minimize that once I stop getting a reward from it? Right. So I'll go out and I'll have a few drinks, but after the second drink, it's like, I don't think that having this third drink is going to be rewarding enough for me to, deal with those consequences the next day and take away from my other goals. So that's a factor number one is I'm just so clear of what the negatives are and what the risk profile is. Number two, I do think that, because I'm really keeping all of my other biological baselines S tier by going in the ocean every day, by keeping my diet dialed all the time. Like that's a big rule of mine. If I go out and I consume alcohol, I don't eat, and I never eat junk food. I never like cheat on my meals because I just crave natural food. So that's a big factor there. I have a pretty solid stack that mitigates a lot of those specific damages from things like alcohol. And also keep in mind, I went sober for 8 months just because, and I know that all of these things, all of these vices, they have no control over me. So I could stop anytime that I want. And I oftentimes do. I just spent a month kind of just doing nothing, but you know, focusing on myself and not drinking at all and not going out at all. So I cycle it. I guess I would say that. And I also do believe that I earned the ability to do it, right? By spending multiple years getting my health under control, spending an extended period of time avoiding all stressors and toxins to build my body up to a level of resiliency where now I can handle it. And now things like that feed into the other pillars of health that I think are equally as important: socialization, relationships, community, all of those things that you could say, yeah, they could be done, in a healthier manner, in a way that doesn't impede on other factors of my biology. But that's not the case for most of the world, right? And if you're relegating yourselves to only spending time with people that are, health pilled or whatever you want to call it, that's fine. But, I'm sure there's people that you'd really jive with that may not have the same level of neuroticism on health that you do. But there's always crossovers, right? Like with a lot of my friends, I'll go and like, let's go to the gym, right? Let's go surf, let's go spearfishing. Those are all very healthy things. So I don't know. I don't feel like I make any compromises. And I also feel like I don't damage my health in anything that I do really seriously.
I think that's really interesting, the whole masculine feminine thing, because it's like it is like kind of like a more feminine thing to like be like so optimized that you're like, hey, I need to go to bed at this time, and like I don't know, the masculine side where it's just like, hey, like dude, I'll just sleep whenever the fuck, and like I'll end up being fine at the end of the day. So I do think there is something there, but I was wondering as far as like the Wanderlust gene, is that something like you tested yourself for, or how did you come to like discover that?
There's wanderlust gene tests, like DRD74 variant tests that you can do with like some sequencing, but that's frivolous, right? There's pretty clear signs that you are a novelty seeker, right? And it's something that I always was, and I always knew that I was. And then I found after the fact that there was a biological reasoning for it. I don't think that that's something that it's like, oh, well, now I'm impacted and it makes a difference. It just helps solidify that that is not a quirk, that is not a defect, that is who I am. And then you can dig deeper into why this gene variant exists. This gene variant is very present in a lot of the nomadic populations that really moved the human race forward. One of the reasons that the human race, among other primates, was so effective at dispersing across the entire world is because some of us had this bug that made us say, yeah, the jungle's great, but what if we go check out the plain, right? What if we take that risk? What if there's more prosperity on that other side? So that gene evolved and it progressed into the gene pool to this modern day because the people that held that gene were the ones that moved this species forward, right? So that's natural in some of us. I do believe it is in some ways a maladaptive trait. And I believe a lot of the reason that some people struggle in the modern world is because of maladaptive traits. They were traits that were once highly beneficial to our existence and our prosperity, but now in this modern, structured, bureaucratic, Kafka-esque world, they're no longer fitting, right? So then we're getting double zambonied by the cultural aspect where they don't want people that have those more wild genes, those genes that make them independent, those genes that make them sovereign, those genes that make them not fit in and meld with the larger system. And then two, you have the fact that a majority of society is crafted in a way that complements people that have those more agricultural based genes. Those genes that were selectively bred for once we started discovering agriculture, and the ones that survived were the ones that joined the feudal system of farming. So, I think that is the reason why there's so much push against this kind of movement, even if it's not deliberately stated. I just don't think like an environment and a society depends on interdependence, right? They want everything to be dependent on one another. They want everything to have its specific role and its specific cog and gear in a machine. So if you have an independent machine that doesn't need the rest of the system, that's not something that you're going to condone in a way that like, hey, that's good for you. It's going to be something that you're going to kind of just like hush off and not really talk about it. A lot of times what they do is they label it as a disorder, and they find pharmacological solutions that end up kind of just robbing people of their entire vitality. And it's disheartening to see.
What is your like overall view on like SSRIs and just like if you were ever on them or like got prescribed them, like what do you think is the best way to go about that? Because a large percentage of the population's on some sort of pharmaceutical drug that is probably harming them. So
Yeah, and I was part of that large percentage, right? One of the reasons that I got into the deep health stuff was in conjunction with those brain injuries, I had a very adverse reaction to SSRIs after about 7 years. So I was on them for a majority of my teenage years and into my early 20s. So all of that identity that I had, that I built over those years, was impacted by the drugs that I was prescribed that I did not need to be prescribed at all, right? And they weren't helpful either, I don't think. They made things a little bit more fun, but they impact the way that you interact with the world, right? So I think the hardest thing about me going off of SSRIs was coming to the realization that the reason I was the way that I was, the reason that I had certain traits that I thought were just who I was, ended up being just the result of me having, you know, exogenously pumped levels of certain neurotransmitters and neurochemical balance. So going off of them, that was a huge psychological thing of being like, okay, cool, I have to reinvent, who I am and come back to the understanding of myself in absence of these chemicals, right? And so that was a big factor there. But, the biggest thing that I always struggled with was anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure and reward properly. And I realized it because I was so unaffected by anything scary. I didn't really feel fear. I remember there were like so many situations where normally someone would be like, "Oh my God, this is the scariest thing that ever happened to me," and I barely raised an eyebrow. Almost getting killed in a motorcycle accident and not even thinking about it. Being in really, really stressful situations and having no impact. But seeing how that impacted my relationship, seeing how that impacted my desire and my drive was really tough. And unfortunately, it actually got worse when I got off of them. And I got it a lot less bad than a lot of other people. There's one thing with SSRIs, PSSD, it's called post SSRI sexual dysfunction. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? A lot of people who take SSRIs, they have androgen receptor deficiencies for the rest of their life. They have the inability to feel certain pleasures. They have a really hard time connecting with people, and they have a hard time with like sexual function as well, which is terrifying. So that is so scary. For me, the way that I was able to kind of gain back my ability to feel myself, and I think most importantly, to resensitize myself to the world, was it probably had something to do with the crazy protocols that I was doing, but I always chalk it back up to nature. I really do think, and I was thinking about it this morning, out of all of the things that I did, committing my life to one that's aligned with nature and is just embedded in nature has done more to move the needle than anything else I've tried. And it's one of those things that you don't realize because you do it for a month and you're like, I feel better, but my problems aren't solved. You do it for 6 months every single day for the majority of your day. And all of a sudden, it's like a frog in a bathwater that's heating up to a rolling boil. And one day you're like, holy shit, life is so much better. And, I think I'm finally there. And it's multifactorial. It's not just nature, but nature is that initial catalyst, in my opinion, that then improved my relationships, that then improved my fulfillment with my work. And all of a sudden, I get to a point where I'm sitting there and I'm just like, wow, it's been 5 months and I haven't had a bout of anhedonia, right? I haven't had a period where I was depersonalized or I wasn't able to feel. So with anybody getting off of SSRIs, the first thing they should look at is probably the fact that a majority of SSRIs use fluoride as a primary constituent. So that is going to be a risk profile in and of itself, compounded with the fact that there's fluoride in the water. I mean, there's fluoride in the salt here in Mexico. So look into that. Look into ridding your body of fluoride as well as the damage caused by fluoride. Gastrointestinal issues are very common with like serotonergics. There seems to be a correlation with excess gut serotonin in the gut and irritable bowel syndrome and Crohn's disease. So I would look at healing your gut. We really downplay the fact that the gut was our first brain. There's a reason it's called the gut instinct. The more healed and fortified your gut is, the more I find you're able to connect with your intuition and your more primal self. So I think that's a big factor there. I think a lot of it, though, is trial and error for sure, right? Understanding that oftentimes people who are prescribed these drugs are prescribed as a band aid solution for symptom management, right? Because doctors have an obligation to reduce symptoms. They don't want somebody coming in saying they're depressed and then them saying, well, what if you try improving your lifestyle? And then them going and killing themselves. They have to play by the book. And the book says prescribe pills, right? So that's ironic given the fact that suicidal ideation is one of the primary side effects of antidepressants, which is so ass backwards. But yeah, you have to play by the book. I do think that antidepressants do have a clinical use, albeit rare, when someone is in an acutely bad situation that they not just need to get through. But the idea of using SSRIs as something to mitigate like problems for the rest of your life is going to really destroy and deteriorate a person over time. And I've seen it firsthand. But I've seen a lot of success stories of people getting off them. I think the biggest thing is having to reinvent yourself after. And the same applies for other drugs as well, ADHD medication in particular.
It seems like you're very like in tune with yourself as far as like the things that like kind of move the needle for you. So have you always been that way, or how did you get more in tune with like your inner wisdom almost, like your gut
Yeah,
feeling?
well, I was always curious, right? I was always very, very curious about why things were the way that they are. Why am I the way that I am? I think most importantly, I always wanted to understand and rationalize everything. And oftentimes I realized that that desire to rationalize was came from a desire of control and a hatred of not being in control. And I always like being in control of things. So, it took me a while to rebuild that relationship with that desire for control and focus on my locus of control, right? Getting really good at observing things objectively and then making a stance then and there of saying, okay, cool, here's what's going on. What are the factors that are in my control that I can immediately move the needle on? And what are things that are outside of my control? And if you condition yourself to think in a certain way for a long enough time, your brain just accepts it as the way that it is. And that's something that we really downplay is the malleability of our subconscious. The ability for us to essentially manipulate and gaslight ourselves into believing whatever we want. And it's important to know that because that is what society is doing to you on a daily basis. That's why propaganda works. The same reason that affirmations work. Because your intuitive thinking brain or your rationally thinking brain, the thing that's able to fabricate ideas in your head, is very recently developed, right? That is the most new portion of our brain. Our subconscious has been around forever. Our reptilian brain has been around forever. So it's almost like two different entities that you can learn to utilize and essentially mold your subconscious to the way you want it to think. And you need to do it. Otherwise, someone else is going to do it for you. So I really think that that needle started moving when I got back from Thailand and I was done with kind of being who I was in college, right? Because who I was in college was me, but it was a shallower version of me. And I never really gave myself the time and solitude to dig deeper into who I was and who I wanted to be. Luckily, I graduated during COVID, so that gave me a really long period of time to reinvent myself. And it was a grueling process. It was all I did. I just observed myself and I thought about myself and I thought about the world and I was voraciously consuming information about these great thinkers who had these ideas and these hypotheses of why humans are the way that they are and why the world is the way that the way that it is. And eventually I got enough data points and I got enough understanding and observations about myself that I had a really, really clear vision of who I was and how it was different. And that was good because it gave me the fortitude and the self-confidence and the self-awareness to know beyond a reasonable doubt what was best for me and not be impacted by external influences. So I do think that, I came to a lot of these conclusions on my own. I made a lot of decisions about my life against the will and against the suggestions of people that I trusted and people that I believed in, mentors, parents, professors. And, I look back on it and someone asked me, what would I tell my younger self? I would honestly tell my younger self that I was right. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. We have this intuitive sense of what's best for us, but then we're conditioned to believe that that's not the case by our mentors and people we look up to. And sometimes that's good advice. Oftentimes it's bad advice. And a lot of that also depends is like how rare of an individual are you? The rarer you are, the less traditional advice is going to apply to you. So learning how to do that in a non-self-aggrandizing way, I see a lot of people get this idea that they're different, and then they take that and they run with it as if they're special, as if they're better than other people. And that's the best way to cuck yourself and just become incredibly unlikable. But spending time just observing yourself is probably the best skill that you can acquire.
I've heard you mention like obviously the aspect of like social connection, just how important that is. But have you always been, or I'm not even gonna ask you, I know that you've always been an extrovert, but how do you view people that like consider themselves an introvert? Because like I always like told myself that, and I feel like that was like a thing that kind of just screwed me over because I was like, hey, I'm an introvert. I like being alone, and now I'm just like, hey, I want to be with people, but I just don't want to be with people that are making me feel one way. But then it's a whole other aspect where it's like, hey, like I have my own mind. I can kind of be, I don't know if that makes sense, but like I don't have to be so manipulated by what they're saying. Like I could just have my own mind and like that's fine. So I don't know if you're getting where I'm going, but like as far as introvert, is an introvert an actual thing or like I don't know, you can kind of go wherever you want with that one.
Yeah, so this idea of introversion and extroversion and ambiversion, it's grossly oversimplified. We all have aspects of both. We all need our alone time and we all need our time socializing. Some people need some more than others. But an often very common trope that I see is people saying, I would socialize, but everybody in the world is shitty. I tweeted something about that today, and there's a lot of people in the comments. They're like, yeah, but society is sick, and everybody is super. They're not on my level. And first of all, I think that's too self-aggrandizing. And second of all, if you're not meeting good people, people that you want to relate to, people that you want to spend time with, that's on you. That's because you're not very good at attracting good people, right? You attract the type of people that you're like. So that's a really good litmus test of how well are you doing in life is how much do you like the people that you're attracting? So I don't waste my time on people that I don't find to be good people. I have a pretty strict rule. It's like I think I'm good at seeing the good in everybody, but I don't waste my time on people that are assholes for the most part. I think the more you put yourself out there, the more you give people a reason to be attracted to you, the better people you're going to attract. And in this modern world, that's why it's really important to take advantage of this medium that we have, which is social media, and use it for good to attract those good people. A lot of people, they just try to attract anybody and everybody, and they end up getting horrible audiences. But if you're authentic and if you put your real stuff out there day over day over day, you will not only grow individually and become a better person because of it, but you're going to attract incredible people. The most incredible people that I've met have all come from me putting myself out there on the internet. They come now and, I have them come and we live together for a month. And it's the best experience and the best time I've ever had. They help me grow. I help them grow. It's an incredible relationship that started from the Bird app, right? So you have to go out and you have to take initiative on finding the good people out there because if you're not doing anything and you're just isolating yourself in your room, they're not going to find you and you're not going to find them. And then you're going to go out and you're going to find the first person who attracts that same low level of energy. It's going to be a recipe for disaster.
Do you kind of view that as like the law of attraction then?
I think so. I'm not very familiar with the law of attraction. Can you give me the elevator pitch on that?
I don't even know it that well. I'm pretty sure it's the idea is like whatever you kind of like put out to the world, you'll reciprocate. So kind of like what you said. So if you're a dude and you're kind of just, I don't know, lackadaisical, you're gonna find a friend who's that way, or a girl that's gonna like someone who's that way, if that makes sense. But if you're like, hey, I'm throwing myself out there, I'm gonna like kill it in life, then you're likely to like attract those kind of people to you. And I've already started to notice that, like, as I like evolved myself on Twitter and just trying to like, I don't know, it's like it's easier to attract people when you have something going for you, if that makes sense. Like once you start
That
doing
is,
stuff, it's like, hey, like someone wants to like be a part of your life. Because for a while I was just like,
yeah,
hey, like I want to be in these rooms or like being with cooler people, but it's like, dude, you're not cool. Like you're not gonna attract those people. So
that's exactly it. It's, it's one of those things, the less you try, the better your outcomes always. Romantic relationships, platonic relationships. The less you try, the more you focus on yourself, the more people are attracted to you. People don't like people that are seekers. It's just it's just one of those weird realities. It's almost like the less you care, the better your outcomes are, which is orthodoxical to what we're talking about, or excuse me, it's completely opposite to what we're talking about, is like making the effort and going out there. But yeah, doing that for your own sake is really the key. Not being someone because that's who you think people want you to be, being someone because that's who you want to be, and then that naturally being results and like causing you to attract good people. And I think a lot of it comes down to, like, whenever I really, go out or go to meet people, I only focus on enjoying myself and enjoying my time with others. That's the only thing I go out for, and that's the best outcome. If I go out and, like, when I was, if I was looking for a romantic partner, I probably wouldn't find one. You find all these things when you stop looking, and that's just the real reality of the world. Everything I've done were things that I was once pursuing, but they didn't come to me until I stopped pursuing them. And all of a sudden they just fall on my lap. It's weird.
I'm pretty sure that's like the Alan Watts whole his whole like theory was just like the less you try, like just I don't know, good things will kind of like happen to you. I don't know.
That's spot on. The funny thing about Alan Watts and a lot of these spiritual teachers is Alan Watts died of alcoholism.
Hmm. No, yeah, it's
Like,
just weird because like
it's,
a lot of the people like I don't know, they put out some image and it's just like I don't know if it's really even though it's true, it's hard to live by those things a lot of times.
yeah. And I'm not saying that as a reason to downplay the wisdom that Alan Watts has provided to the world. But it's just so interesting that a lot of the greatest thinkers in this world were always deeply troubled. And they oftentimes were not able to get over those troubles. And a lot of times that came down to substance abuse. Alan Watts had alcoholism. Terence McKenna, smoked weed until the day that he died and was probably a contributor to his brain tumor. And he admitted that. Jordan Peterson, who I think some of his early lectures were some of the best things that were ever given to the internet. He almost died from benzodiazepine use. So all of these guys that are great thinkers are oftentimes very, very troubled. And I think that's just the reality of seeking knowledge and pursuing wisdom, is you kind of lift away the veil to a certain point where a lot of people just can't handle it. Even the greatest minds can't handle it. So for me, when I was really deep into that, trying to understand the meaning of life, I found it to be somewhat self-defeating, and it made it difficult for me to interact with the world. So once I said, screw it, I'm done with that, that's when my life started getting a lot better. And I kind of just let go and I stopped thinking so much and I just started doing. That's when all of the beneficial outcomes really started coming about.
I'm kind of going to go another way with this, but um, as far as like your family, like do they still live in the United States, and like how do you deal with that as far as trying to go see them and like whether it be like Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that, and like how do they view what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely the black sheep, 100%. And that's something they always knew from a very, very, very early age. I made it very clear that I respected my family a lot. I loved my family, but I knew what I wanted, and there was nothing stopping me from getting there. And was not going to listen to anybody but myself, right? And that was just the reality of who I was. I do see my family, I'd say every 6 months. I have siblings, I have my parents, they all live in the United States. And I actually just got back from visiting them. And it's great to see them. I went through a lot of periods in my life where I was working on myself and I was grinding and I was struggling. but I did it all independently. Like that's just the relationship that I have with, my life and my work. I prefer to grind in silence, even though I don't grind, but like suffer. I like to solve my own problem. So, they still have no idea what I'm doing. They have no idea, like, they don't have an understanding of how this world works, right? This idea that, like, no, how can you do all this stuff? How are you, on a boat at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday, So they are from a different generation. And that's an issue that I see with this modern generation and, the world we live in now is the generational divide. If you think about the environment that our parents grew up in, it was very similar to the environment that our grandparents grew up in the sense that the exact same funnel to success, it was almost identical. You go to school, you get a good job, you get a pension, you get like maybe some stock options in that company, and you work there your entire life. There are set goals and there are set paths to this idea of success, security, and freedom. The modern world that we live in is so different. The advancements that we're seeing on a yearly basis outweigh and outpace the advancements we saw in the last 5 generations. So the older generation doesn't understand what this newer generation is being exposed to on a daily basis. And that's causing, unfortunately, this certain level of disrespect for our elders. And I think that that is probably one of the worst things that can happen because although the context is different, humans have been facing the same struggles and the same battles and the same challenges since the beginning of time, right? That's why so many ancient stories, that's why things like the Bible are still so applicable to this day. And that's why all of my favorite books were written in the 40s because it's the same problems. It's the same shit. It's a different toilet. And that's something that we realized. But when it comes to, I guess, does my family rationalize it? Immediate family, they have no idea what I'm doing. Extended family, they have less of an idea what I'm doing. But I see some people that really admire and appreciate it and wish that they could have done it when they were my age. And then that brings me back to this thing that I think was really a key to how I set my life up was getting really, really good at observing the regrets of elderly. So, thing that a lot of us have, and I think everybody has up until your early 20s, is you look at adults and you just think they immediately have it all figured out. That adults are these infallible creatures, right? When I looked around in my neighborhood and I looked at all of the parents, I thought they had everything figured out. They were a different species, right? They didn't deal with the same issues. They were so much smarter than kids. They had everything figured out. You hit a certain threshold. For me, it happened when I was 22. That you just start looking at adults as wrinkly kids. You realize that all of them are walking around with successes, they're walking around with struggles, and they're walking around with trauma that a lot of them never solve. Why does our neighbor Andy have that nice boat? Why does he get a new car every week? Oh, well, it's because he really wanted to be a painter, but instead he went into enterprise sales, and this is his way of lashing out. Why did Jeffrey down the street have a midlife crisis and break up with his wife? Why is old man Herbert so grumpy all the time? And then you can start reverse engineering and ask yourself, what did this guy do right? What did this guy do wrong? What can I learn from him or them without making an assumption of it being good or bad? And I think that's the most important thing, and that's a skill. There's some quote about it being a sign of intelligence, but the ability to entertain an idea without accepting it as good or bad, that's something that I think everyone can toy with. And it's quite literally the way that I look at it is I take in an idea and now I can just juggle it in my head and no opinion is being made. I'm merely observing it and toying with it and playing with it. And it can chill in my head for weeks without me ever making a decision of whether or not it's good or bad. And I think people struggle with oversimplification. It is so much easier for us to rationalize the external world by making everything binary, by making everything either good or bad. But in reality, that's just not how things work. Everything has the potential for good or bad, and there's no such thing as binariness in nature, for the most part.
Yeah, I feel like I had that same kind of realization as far as I heard Joe Rogan say that one time, like once you realize like all the parents are just like grown up babies, but I never really was able to realize that until I think I was like more so like just on my own, just like, hey, like I don't just have like a house to go back to kind of thing, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know, like when you're on your own versus when you're always like traveling with like your parents, it's like you have that like security blanket. So I guess when did you realize like, hey, like I can kind of like do whatever I want, like, and then was that like daunting for you, or was that like something that just gave you like a bunch of joy and like, hey, like I could do so many things? Because there is that kind of like almost like paralysis. I don't know if that's the right word, but like you can do whatever you want, so you get paralyzed and you don't know what to do. I feel like I've felt that sometimes. So how do you view that?
The paradox of choice is real. It's very real. We live in an era of abundance as opposed to an era of scarcity. And humans evolved primarily in scarce environments where we needed to take what we could get. Now we have everything at our fingertips, literally everything. So that is difficult. In terms of when did I realize that I could do whatever I want? I realized I could do whatever I want when I got into fear setting and identifying my worst case scenario. So, in Thailand, that was a big one, completely on my own, and realizing like what's the worst case scenario here if everything went to shit. But I think for me, being very independent from the get go, starting my first business when I was in high school, and realizing that if all shit went and hit the fan, if I lost everything right now, if I lost the support from my family, I dropped out of school, I could figure out a way to make myself live. I always knew that I had that in me. And I think secondarily, I always knew what the worst case scenario was because there were times in my life where I was so broke and I was so pinching pennies that I got really, really good at living so below my means that I could survive anywhere for pennies a day. And knowing that I could always go back to that and it wouldn't be very different to the life that I live now is so freeing that I think that's my real competitive advantage is that I know I could lose everything tomorrow and not care. And I think that's the one thing that's enabled me to go down these paths and then get to a point where I realize it's not the path that I want to go down. And the next day, drop everything with no regrets. And I've done that so many times. I've done that with business models. I've done that with entire lives that I've created. And one day just being like, I'm out, peace. I've just been able to do that over and over and over again. Not in a self sabotaging manner, although it used to be a little bit more self sabotaging, but knowing that I always have that in my back pocket, that tomorrow I could go and I could be whoever I want and take all the knowledge that I've learned and all the skills that I've acquired and apply them however I'd like is the most freeing thing possible. People get too comfortable with luxuries. People get too comfortable with things and materialism. They don't want to leave their friends. They don't want to leave their relationship. They don't want to leave their house with all of their things. They don't want to leave their car. But if you can learn to be happy with owning nothing, you can do whatever you want. So even me now, I still live out of a suitcase, right? I rent all of my stuff. When I go to a new place, I leave most of my stuff because none of it has any hold on me. And that came from getting really deep into minimalism my senior year of college. And I mean like really deep. I mean like eating out of one bowl for 6 months just because. So that in and of itself is probably the most freeing thing that you can do. It is the best thing that I've ever done.
I had like a similar realization. Like before I left Arizona, I had all my stuff in my apartment from college, like 20 sweatshirts, 20 sweatpants. I was like, fuck, I'm just going down to 33 pairs of clothes from like the documentary had that. So now I'm just like, all right, I'm up one suitcase. And it's obviously easier here in Costa Rica because I don't have to wear a shirt, don't have to stress about that. But is that what you say when you mean like I could just leave anytime just because you have like no clothes, like you could just rent anywhere? So is that your perspective on it?
Yep. I moved places on Wednesday and it took me 20 minutes to pack everything up and get up and leave. I
I feel
have
like people in the U.S. are like the idea is just so foreign. So I mean, even though like it seems like it's way more freeing, like it doesn't line up with like the American lifestyle whatsoever.
no, because we're on a lifestyle where the economy depends on materialism, right? The economy depends on materialism. Your job and your employers depend on you continuing to buy and consume things, so you still need a salary. So it's just completely orthogonal to our entire existence in the state. It's very much an act of rebellion. And for me, I did it because of the mental clarity that it brings me. Knowing that I have tabs on every single thing that I own in existence frees up this headspace. Because whether we like it or not, every single thing that we own takes up a little bit of space in our head. How is it? How much am I paying for it? What quality is it in? Do I want to use it? And I remember when I was in college, because I loved t-shirts. I always loved t-shirts, which is funny because I never wear a shirt. But I loved like my graphic tees. I loved my fraternity tees and my sorority tees. And I found them as an extension of my personality. And I wake up every morning and I'd be like, what do I wear? What do I wear? What do I wear? And I'd get so much of this brain fatigue for no reason. I'd use up a lot of my thinking decision points for no reason. So now it's like I wear cotton shorts and I wear t-shirts like this, right? I just wear different colored t-shirts that are blank, and then I usually turn them into cutoffs at the end. And it's just I think it also aligns with a natural desire of mine to only focus my energy and effort on things that are going to benefit me and improve me intrinsically. I don't care about changing up my style. I don't care about learning skills that require a tool. I care about skills that like grow me, right? I'm not interested in learning a Facebook ad manager. I'm much more interested in learning how to have a better vocabulary. I'm more interested in learning how to better market myself, how to speak better, how to have better relationships. Because those are things that nobody can take away from me. They're never going to go out of style and be able to apply them in any context, right? So that's kind of just something that's super deep down to me, to my core. I think it even applies like in the sports that I play. I never have played sports that require me to have like a lot of gear, right? I like sports that are just deep down core to who I am, right? Jujitsu, martial arts, those types of things. Skiing is a different story. I love skiing. I love surfing. But even then, it's like those are things that I focus all of my energy on myself. I don't want things, I want to improve me.
I think that's a good way to go about it. And I appreciate you coming on, Noah. We can wrap this one up. We don't need to take any more of your time.
No, dude, come on, ask some more questions.
You
You
sure?
ask good questions.
All right, I got you. Um, I did want to ask you more about like your mindset. So like, I think you have a great mindset as far as like, hey, I want to do this. Let me go out and do it. So, do you have any plan for doing that? Like, do you write stuff down or think about it at night, meditate on it? Like, what do you do as far as mindset?
To be honest, I do nothing. I'm going to be honest on that one, and I don't think that's a good thing. I should be
Hmm.
doing more of that stuff. When I was doing it, that was the real needle mover in my life. Was writing
Hmm.
everything down, learning how to observe myself, learning how to program my brain essentially. And I just did it so much to the point that it's now just hardwired in me. But when it comes to I still struggle. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I don't struggle. It's very difficult for me to do things that I don't want to do, to the point where like posting a podcast takes so much of my energy. I procrastinate on it for 2 weeks, but then I sit down to do it and it takes 5 minutes. I'm horrible with redundancies, but I just understand that's who I am. So I just try to craft a life that helps me avoid difficult things that aren't conducive to me and then max out on those things that I really enjoy that other people aren't good at. So I think it's just like natural desire for self-awareness that I can't help. Um, in terms of mindset, I very much have this built-in response to looking at how I could do things better the next time, every time. And a lot of that came from business, right? Because I found that business was the best channel for personal development because something was at stake, something was on the line. And now for me, a lot of the things that I do for other people, it's the same thing. I don't have the fortitude to do these things for myself, but when I do them for other people and I speak about them to other people, you have this natural desire to avoid cognitive dissonance. So if I know something is best for someone and I tell someone that I think this is best for them, I'm going to do it out of desire to have this continuity. So that's kind of the life hack that I did, because it's like if I'm in a room by myself, I'm not going to do what I tell myself to do. But if I put this stuff out there into the world and I say it is something that I truly believe, then I'm going to have to do it. And that's really the cheat code to me. And it sounds so abstract and a weird approach, but I just look at everything as what would this look like if it were easy, you know? And that to me
Hmm.
was just like a shortcut to overcome some of my deficits.
When you immediately like get to a new place that you like go to, do you ever like, I don't know, feel like it's like not the place that you want to be and you're just like, hey, like what do I do now? I've like got to a new place, like I don't like it here. People just aren't jiving with them. So what do you do in that aspect?
Yeah. So I always give myself a month somewhere, unless I'm going specifically for like a week just to visit. But you have to understand that there's going to be culture shock anywhere you go. And I realized this because the first day I'd get somewhere, I'd be like, oh my God, get me the fuck out of here. I made a huge mistake. But then by the fourth day,
Yeah.
I felt like home. And I believe that I
Mhm.
have a faster acclimation process. I'm very much a chameleon. So something that would take someone about 2 months to learn or like to internalize, it usually takes me like a week. And that's good and bad. But typically, you want to give yourself 21 days anyway. That's the time it takes to make something feel like part of you and really dive into something, right? That it takes 21 days for a habit to become a habit. It takes 21 days for a house to become a home. So give yourself 3 weeks. Stick to the game plan of committing to everything that you said you're going to commit to. Because I think the worst thing that happens is people get somewhere new and they're like, I have all these plans, like those things that we talked about. I want to go to this restaurant. I want to become the man. I want to socialize. I want to make friends. And they get a little bit of culture shock and then they stop. Well, then flash forward, you get into that bad habit of not going out, not socializing, not making friends. And now it's way harder because you're already there. You're already sunk into this routine. So for me, I tend to just acclimate to wherever I go. If I really don't like somewhere after a while, I'll leave. I do that all the time. And I do that a lot when I'm in cities. But sometimes there'll be things that'll fool you. When I got to this place last time, I was here for about 3 weeks and I wasn't driving with it. And then flash forward, like 3 weeks later, I just got a new apartment and I moved into that and it was like a fresh start. And immediately became the best place I've ever been to. I loved it. I came back and I did all those things that I said I was going to do the first time.
When you say like you build your life in that place, like what does that mean to you? Like just like the community aspects and like all the different things you do while you're there, or what is it specifically that like makes
Yeah,
up the life there?
I think community is like what you build when you build a life. A lot of people are like, I build a life because I buy a bunch of things. I build a life because I start building my own home. But in reality, it's about the people. So, building a life somewhere means that I'm a part of that community, right? People are there. They expect me. They want to see me. They depend on me. When I was in Mexico City, that went in so far that I started doing business in Mexico City, right? I had a bunch of clients there. And that to me is the community. The fact that I can go and I can invite a bunch of people to my house. I walk throughout town and I say hi to everybody, right? And that is what I mean when I say I built that community. I
Mhm.
built a life there.
Do you ever like think that you're like, or feel like you're in like a video game when you're living your life? Because you're just like, dude, like I'm just literally doing whatever I want. Like I'm in the jungle, going swimming in like the ocean. Like I don't know, just like the amount of freedom that you have. Do you ever feel like you're in a video game? If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's funny. That was the thing that got me to living the life that I really wanted to live was just gaslighting myself into treating life like a video game, right? Like becoming a creative character, realizing that there's no limits. I was really good at fear setting and I knew what the worst case scenario was at all times. So that's when I was just like, here's my ideal life. What would it look like if it were easy? And yeah, sometimes it gets lost on me, but a lot of times I'll wake up. I'll wake up in the morning and that's the real time to think about your life because that's when you're the
Yeah.
most tapped in to you're the most sensitive to your environment because you just did an 8 hour dopamine detox. You're still a little sleepy. Your subconscious is still a little bit more activated and disinhibited. So I'll wake up and I woke up this morning and I was like, man, life is good. Life is good, did it. I'm happy, and then who knows, next week there'll be something that I'll be pissed off about and everything will be gloom and doom. But I'd say over the last 6 months, that cloud of gloominess, that cloud of dissatisfaction, that cloud of self sabotage has been nowhere in sight. It's been sunny every day, metaphorically speaking. But that's what I was working for, and that was the goal the whole time. The reason that I do all of this is because I was someone that was very susceptible to not feeling great, very susceptible to getting bored, to not being satisfied, to feeling like I had something missing in my life. And slowly working inch by inch to build up every single one of those pillars to the point where they're all sufficient and they're all adequate, with none of them being out of balance, is finally where I'm at now. And I'm very happy. I think for the first time in my life, I'm proud of myself, which is huge, right? And I can finally look back and say, good job, Noah. A lot of my life was kind of ran by this underlying frustration and this feeling of inadequacy. But now it's like, you did a good job. You can be proud of yourself, you can gloat. And I think that's really important. I think a lot of people use that as cope. I think a lot of people are not hard enough on themselves. I think a lot of people like the fact that they are damaged, like they gloat in their hardship because it's a way to justify it. I'm broken, I'm damaged, I'm inadequate. But I just never accepted that. I've never been satisfied. I always knew that if there's something that I didn't like about myself, there's a way that I could approach it, that I could improve it. And in that process, even if I didn't hypothetically improve it, I could come to terms with it. And that comes back to just understanding what is in your control. Pushing the limits of what is actually in your control, though, is important as well. Because some people will be like, that's not in my control at all. That's just the way things are. But in reality, there's always something in your control.
Have you always been really self-critical? And then at what point did you kind of get past that and realize, hey, it might not be like self-criticism, but this is really going to drive me to start doing good stuff?
I have. I've always been dissatisfied. I think I struggled with self image for a long time, not on a purely superficial level, but I always felt like there was something wrong with me, that I was always deficient. And I had to compromise, or I had to compensate in other areas, right? I had to be smarter than everybody. I had to be stronger than everybody. I had to be, there always had to be something that I had to be better than someone at. And I think that started to shift. I still have it sometimes, but that really started to shift when did that start to shift? It's one of those things where you don't notice it until one day you wake up. You're like, oh, I'm actually quite satisfied with myself. And, I'm doing okay. I'm doing well enough, but I'm okay with that. I think a lot of people go through that and they say, they have a recency bias where they're like, oh, I was way too hard on myself, or don't be so self-critical, don't be hard on yourself. I refrain from doing that because I do think the reason that I was able to craft the life that I lived is just refusing to accept things for the way that they are, and always trying really really hard to come up with a better outcome, like craft my own environment, craft my own existence. And I don't think I would have been able to do that if I wasn't dissatisfied, if there weren't aspects of my life that I didn't like and that were causing me conflict. So
Mhm.
I'm not going to downplay the fact that being self critical helped me.
Is there any part of your life right now where you're at all dissatisfied, or anything where you're like, hey, I want to improve this aspect? Or you
Yeah, I
completely
want to get
like,
more into my
sorry, you
I
go.
want to be more committed to my work. I want to be more committed to creating something of substance at a larger scale. I want more impact, and I know I can be having so much more impact, right? I think that's the biggest thing now that I'm really focusing on is how can I increase that impact? Because I got all the other pillars up. My life is great. Everything's incredible. My relationships are incredible. My health is top tier. It's the best it's ever been, and it's effortless. And I think that's the key, right? The key is not to be operating at 1,000%, but having to put all of your chips in that basket. The key is to bring these pillars up to the point where they're effortless. Health is effortless to me. Lifestyle and enjoying life is effortless to me. The thing that I'm dissatisfied with myself is the inability to be deliberate. I want to be more structured and regimented, which is funny because I built a life that enabled me to be completely unstructured and unregimented. But I want to be able to plan my day where I get the shit done that I need to get done. And then I have time to be present in the things that I enjoy. Because I'm kind of always on, right? I'm always on, or I'm just completely off. And that's very natural. It's a binary thing that a lot of people that are hunter types have. And I accept that for the way that it is. But now I'm just looking at it once again as like, what would this look like if it were easy? And this was my key to all of my career success, is looking at what it would look like if it was easy and identifying where I perform really well. I perform really well when I'm forced to perform. That's why I love jujitsu. That's why I love live sparring, because that's where I learn, because I have no other option but to perform. That's why I love being put on blast with podcasts like this, where I just want you to rattle me with questions, because that forces me to perform. That forces me to think. And just the process of me having to ask this question and answer this question of what am I dissatisfied about is forcing me to answer it. Because otherwise, I'd ask myself that question and I'd get distracted. So yeah, I would
Yeah.
like to be more deliberate with
When
my
you say
life.
you're
I would
off,
like and say I'm going to do this right now. But
when you say you're off, what does that look like?
doom scrolling, doing nothing, analysis
Yeah.
paralysis. So, we all have this ideal self. What do we look like when we're firing on all cylinders? When we're the best version of ourselves, when we're the Ubermensch, when we're our full actualized self. And then we have the shitty version of us, the shitty version of us that shows up sometimes. But a lot of us don't realize when we're in those states. I know when I'm in those states. And when I'm not on, I'm completely ineffective at doing anything. I literally can't do anything. I'm not going to be able to send a single email. I'm not going to be able to post a single tweet. No client work's going to be getting done. Nothing's going to be getting done. So I've gotten a lot better at identifying those situations, and I have my toolbox of things that get me out of that situation. And what it comes down to is it's your sympathetic nervous system being activated. A lot of us have the fight or flight mode. That's what we think of when we think of the sympathetic nervous system. But there's also the freeze response. And the freeze response is that state that you're in when your body doesn't know if you should go into fight or flight. For me, I go directly into that freeze response. I sit on the couch, I can't do anything. I can't be present, I can't just think. I have to, I'm craving stimulation, but it's not the good kind. So that's when I usually get caught in doom scrolling. That's when I get caught in, constantly refreshing Twitter. It's like I lose control of my senses, and I despise that aspect of me, which isn't a good approach to it. I shouldn't despise it. I should get better at observing it and work with myself and negotiate with myself to get out of it. But now I have my toolbox. I'll go for a walk. I'll get a workout in. I will do something that is creative and create something in this world. I'll hop on a call. I will hop on a call, and that will get me out of it immediately because now I'm forced to perform.
Mm-hmm. What was I to say? Sorry, I forgot my question. Um, regarding, oh yeah, it was regarding like exercise. So like you said that it's effortless. So how is it effortless for you as far as like what do you do for like training right now and like what's your regimen?
So I've been obsessed with training since I was 14 years old. I watched the movie Warrior with Tom Hardy, and that's who I wanted to be. That was my ideal. So I was in my basement. I remember I was watching that movie. I went and I grabbed a dumbbell. And as I was watching the movie, I started doing rows. I was so tiny. I was too afraid to go to the gym because I was so small. And ever since then, I've just been obsessed. It was my escape. But learning to set the ego aside and learning that that's cope of just training nonstop 24/7 is just a form of escapism. I realized that your body responds a lot better when you give it ample time for recovery. So I really got into the Mike Mentzer model recently, where I'm only training, heavily 3 days a week, or I was 3 days a week, short sessions, and really, really explosive. Now, hypertrophy is no longer my goal. To be honest, I'm kind of uninterested in just being really jacked. I just like the exploration process. So right now, my activity levels are a lot higher because I enjoy it, and I know that's going to have negative outcomes on my body composition. I don't really care because I'm doing it for fun. So I'm surfing a lot. I go in the ocean every single day. I walk a lot. I like these jungle runs that I've been doing, these barefoot jungle runs. I do a lot of sprints on the beach. I do jujitsu a few days a week. I do a little bit of striking and kickboxing. And now I'm focusing on some skill progressions within, I guess you call it almost like calisthenics. I'm just at a functional gym, and I'm honestly just messing around and having fun. I'm just doing that to keep things fresh. My activity levels are high. I think also, I started fighting again, and fighting, it just unlocks something in you that makes you really want to go hard and pursue it. And it really just taps into something deep. I do think that some people are naturally, they're natural born fighters and they're naturally combat minded. And for me, I realized that the second I got on the mat. So embracing that and really trying to kind of pursue my potential there, because that is so much more rewarding to me than being jacked.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, but I feel like for a lot of people, they're just so far off that it's like, I don't know, it's almost like insulting that you would be like, hey, like it's so easy, like it's so effortless. So has that been just like dedication to the grind for like 10 years, or what do you attribute that to?
I attribute that to curiosity and enjoyment.
Yeah.
That's it.
So
That's it.
you've always enjoyed like every exercise routine that you've done.
Every single one. I love
Yeah.
all of them. I
Yeah.
love the response from exercise. And that was kind of one of the keys to me being who I am and having any semblance of success in a life, really, is my obsession with physicality. I think it's super important to have a balance between physicality and being cerebral. And I love teetering the edges on both of those. I find the harder I work out physically, the harder my brain works. So I'm a physical guy, and I was born, like all of us, to be very physically active, and I love it. I also am really good at avoiding any ideology. So the issue is people will get obsessed with one training modality and one training modality only. And they're like, I'm a CrossFitter. I'm only going to do CrossFit. Well, you start hitting plateaus. You start getting burnt out from your exercises. You'll have muscular imbalances. and then you'll just quit entirely. The same thing happens with people that dedicate their entire lives to sports. I'm a generalist. I go and I switch up my training style every month. I'll go 1 month and it's like, I'm gonna just do like really mentor mode stuff. I'm gonna work on a lot of machines. I'm gonna work on hypertrophy, lower my CNS activation. And I'm like, that's good, that's enough. I'll go get a new gym membership. And now I got this new gym membership, functional gym, all martial arts, a little bit of training here and there. And I think that's the key is like, I've never stuck to one training style for longer than like 2 or 3 months.
Mhm. That seems ideal. And then also when you couple that with the ocean swims and jungle runs, it's not like it's like too, I don't know, just like the idea of like going to a gym and just you're working out on a treadmill. It's just like that doesn't seem at all like, I don't know, like something you would want to do. And it's like what you're doing, it seems way more enjoyable. So it
Yeah,
makes
I mean,
sense
it's
that you enjoy
masochistic.
it.
It's masochistic for sure. And that's the biggest shift that I've had in health and fitness in general is that health does not have to be a self-deprecating process. We think that being healthy requires sacrifice, that being healthy requires pain and suffering. But that's not how it works. Like, or we naturally want to be healthy. Our body, like, it pulls us towards healthy habits. But the environment that we live in is so inherently toxic and so inherently unhealthy. And unfortunately, modern advertisers and modern businesses have found out ways to leverage those same pathways that want you to be healthy and to manipulate those to buy their products and to live their lifestyle. So I think it's realigning that natural desire for health. I don't feel as good if I'm not out in the ocean every day. I don't feel as good if I'm not out touching grass, like looking at greenery. So, I just align my life with that. And you do it long enough, it becomes your nature. And now, I can go a while in the city, no problem. It's good to visit, but it's not something that I could spend multiple months in without noticing
Mm.
serious deleterious aspects and impacts on my health. I saw a guy, it's actually so funny. I ran into a guy that owned the gym that I used to work out at in Mexico City. Guy is jacked, absolute unit. And I ran into him here. He was on vacation, and I wasn't working out at all. I hadn't been to a gym in a week. I was doing some like just like the ocean shit, going through the jungle, and I said, "What's up?" to him, and he's like, "Man, you look like you've been hitting it hard." And this was a guy I worked out with 2 hours a day, 6 days a week when I was in the city. He's like, "You look way better than you did when you're in the city." And I didn't even know how to tell him that. It's like, dude, I'm not doing anything. I'm literally just living life. Like there's no masochism going on here. So it takes a disassociation from your ego to realize that more is not better, and to realize that this whole health thing is supposed to be enjoyable and desirable.
Is that the same way you approach your diet aspect?
Yes, I
Hmm.
love everything that I eat. Everything that I eat is delicious, and there's nothing else I want to eat. So if there's something else I wanted to eat,
Yeah.
I would eat it. I have no cravings for junk food. I do not enjoy anything artificial because I know the impact it has on my body. I know the impact it has on my brain, and I know that it's not real food. I know the intentions behind that food. I studied food science. I know how they manipulate molecules in the food and the macronutrient ratios to make it incredibly satiating, when in reality, it's just a way to sell like industrial grade products at high level margins. So yeah, if you saw my diet can be so simple. I just spent a week eating nothing but fruit, ground beef, and honey just because I was like, I just want to do it, and it was delicious every
Yeah.
single time.
All right, my computer's about to die here, Noah, but I appreciate you coming on and your expertise.
Yes, sir, dude. Thank you for having me. Great questions, by the way, Luke. Great
Thank you,
questions.
bro.